Hello, welcome back. And it's time now for our final keynote of the show today. We're joined again by Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Celaya, Deputy Program Manager, USSF University Consortium with United States Department of the Air Force. And our subject is probably my favorite title of the day, actually, Generative AI, Metacognition, and a cat. Do not forget the cat. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us again, and also thank you for providing us with the best title of the show today. The virtual floor is yours, and I'm glad I've seen some of your presentation already, but after a long day like I have had, I thought I would be seeing things. You'll see what I mean very shortly. Aaron, the floor is yours.
Outstanding, Neil. Thank you very much. So with that wonderful introduction, let me just say that it's a real honor and a privilege to be the wrap-up speaker here. I've worked with the BizClik media quite a bit in the past, and it's always a great show. And today's show is no exception to that. We've covered specific use cases like drug discovery, enterprise cloud applications, scaling Gen AI, ethics, the future of AI, specific Gen AI tools and companies. And as the final speaker, it's the privilege and responsibility, and yet the burden to try to bring it all together. So how can we tie all of this together? Well, to answer that question, I'm going to propose a human-centric approach. I'm going to specifically be using metacognition and a cat to help explain. But first, there we go. I would just want to reemphasize that I'm here in my civilian capacity. So everything that I say, all of my views, they're all my own. They do not represent any position or policy of any U.S. governmental agency. And in the spirit of generative AI, I would like to point out that the majority of all the graphics in my presentation were created by me using free online generative AI tools. However, the text and the contents of this presentation are of my own creation, and where appropriate, I have cited other individuals for their incredible work on this topic. So to get started, I'd like to tell you a story. In 1865, Lewis Carroll wrote a great book, a great story called Alice in Wonderland. Lewis Carroll was a mathematics don at the University of Oxford. I remember walking past the walled gardens from where many people thought that Mr. Carroll received his inspiration for this story. And if you're not familiar, Alice in Wonderland is a story of a girl who falls through a rabbit hole and ends up in a fantasy world where she has several adventures. And I believe Alice in Wonderland is also classified as being in the genre of literary nonsense, which to me makes complete sense. And so really, it's a wonderful book, one of the best known works of Victorian literature, and interestingly enough, has never been out of print in almost 160 years of its existence. And at the last count that I'm aware of, it was translated into 174 languages over that time. And so my goal today is to use this time-tested classic to convey lab-tested ideas for real-life testing and potential employment in your life or business. And so to frame the story, here's a very short summary. After Alice follows the white rabbit down the rabbit hole, falls down the hole, drinks from the bottle, eats the cake, passes the caterpillar, then she eventually ends up talking to a Cheshire cat. So what is a lesson that we can take from the exchange between Alice and the Cheshire cat? And really, one of the most important lessons, in my opinion, is that intentionality drives choice. But in order to have intentionality, you have to have knowledge of what to do and how to do it. And that is what usually drives the intentionality of what you're doing. So here's a quick example. So for me, I like to drive and I like to ride motorcycles. And so there have been times in the past where I will just jump on my motorcycle with no objective whatsoever other than to ride. I remember one time going through Montana and driving that beautiful Big Sky region on a nice, beautiful highway with green fields as far as I could see, and coming to a T in the road. And one arrow pointed left and one arrow pointed right. I didn't have a GPS. and it didn't matter which way that I went. Well, I didn't care where I was going. I was out for the joy of the ride. And then have been other times where I have a very specific place to be and I need to get there quickly. And so I will then use the tools in a very specific manner that I've practiced on. And these are two very different ways of employing generative AI in any business venture that we have. And so there are some specific ways that we can get after both of those paths. And so to that end, I just want to revisit the question, how is metacognition and the wisdom of the Cheshire Cat helpful for generative AI deployment in the workplace? And so I want to suggest 5 main inflection points for metacognitive concepts in any current generative AI process. The first, I've already talked about, self-awareness of task knowledge. When Alice first asked the cat, where should I go? That conversation led to that you're sure to get there if you only walk long enough. And we don't want our employees walking for too long or ourselves walking for too long along a path that really doesn't lead anywhere. So we have to have self-awareness of the task. And that is aside from any employment of generative AI, the human has to understand what they're doing in order to have correct prompts, in order to create the prompts that are necessary to generate a helpful output from generative AI. This is the pre-step to creating that prompt. And so then as the human understands what they want and where they want to go, they can have an effective prompt put into any generative AI type of system. And then depending on their awareness of that task and the knowledge, that's going to drive their confidence to evaluate what comes out of a generative AI. Here's where we oftentimes lose people if they are not familiar with the system or with the task that they're supposed to do. Because again, oftentimes, some people see it as a replacement. It's not. It's an extension. It is an elevation of processes that already exist. And so with your human being an expert in their own right, and then using generative AI as a tool, they should be able to have then the confidence to assess what comes out of that generative AI output. The Cheshire Cat said, "You may have noticed I'm not all there myself." And so that is an important component. Your knowledge and your experiences, bringing your whole self to that equation is a big game changer when it comes to employment. The third step is then after we can evaluate that output from the generative AI, humans will oftentimes run into this, either confidence or fear. Confidence usually comes if they have a high ability or knowledge in the task already. Fear comes if they don't. So for example, if you're not a coder and you want to put in a generative AI prompt to generate code for a certain type of output, if you don't know how to code, how can you assess? How can you evaluate? Now, one of the best things that I've seen come out yet with the generative AI tools is that they include a probability that it is correct. And so that's based off of feedback from users, and it'll include a percentage. That is a very outstanding tool for any generative AI tool to include the probability that it is correct. So the metacognitive principles actually apply to the tech itself as well. And so the cat said, the proper order of things is often a mystery to me. And so if it was a mystery to begin with, it's not going to be clear once you've used the generative AI tool, usually, especially if it's a nebulous problem or if it's a problem where you have no expertise. And so with that, the fourth step, before a user even engages in using a generative AI, they're going to ask this question. I don't know how many people watching this right now have children or dependents, and there's a lot of laundry to be folded, and you ask the question: is this faster if I do it myself, or if I help them do it, or if I have them do it? And so that is a question that your users are going to ask of Gen AI. And right now, it's not going to be about laundry. It might be in the future, but right now it's about other tasks. Maybe it's coming up with an email. Maybe it's coming up with a picture. And so, is Gen AI better? That's an interesting question, and that will come through some of the recommendations I have at the end of this presentation. And the Cheshire Cat said, well, some go this way and some go that way. But as for me, myself, personally, I prefer the shortcut. And so the interesting thing is that we will never get to the shortcut if we don't get experience. And so really the way to the shortcut is small investments up front and exponential gains down the road. And number 5, integration of Gen AI with existing workflows. And this is really the crux of human machine teaming. The Cheshire Cat said, imagination is the only weapon in the war with reality. And so the reason for that inclusion of that statement is that it might take some imaginative effort to see where generative AI solutions can play in existing workflows. And one of the best ways to do it is to start in an experimentation phase where there are low cost, low stakes. The human is still in charge of the output. Just get started. There's a story about a buffalo. A buffalo will usually run towards a storm. If a buffalo sees a storm coming, it'll run towards it when other animals run away from it. The reason given in the story is that the buffalo knows that by running towards the storm and through the storm, it'll get through the storm faster by hitting it head on. That's the way to approach generative AI in your workflows. Just get started, but make sure that before you learn the reliability metrics that you have human oversight and that the human is in charge of the decide and act portions at a minimum. And I would like to give credit for these 5 points back to the authors of this paper, that this was a very well thought out process. And these are some of the main inflection points in any generative AI process. So you might be asking yourself, how do I get started? Well, let's turn back to our cat for some advice when he says every adventure requires a first step. And so to that end, let me just say that it really doesn't matter, in my opinion, as long as you keep it low stakes, low cost, and reduce the barriers to entry in your process, and you use it as an augmentation to elevate existing processes. By doing so, all of these things we've talked about today in this conference can be applied and can be used at the tactical level. And so, and then you want to make sure to include some other considerations, the programmatic considerations for your business in particular. There's data security considerations. But the good news is you can just get started. Pick an easy win and just get started. Get your hands dirty. So here are 4 recommendations that I have to get started with generative AI in any business process or any personal process that you're using. Number 1 is training. And I don't mean just training with the generative AI tool. The most important asset that any business has is its people. Your people need to be trained on the task itself. Your people need to be proficient in what they're doing, and your business needs to meet a need in the marketplace. Generative AI is a tool to enhance that, to enhance their ability to function and to be creative. But it is not generally the end state. And so more metacognitive awareness and knowledge in the task, and then how to appropriately use generative AI tools is going to be key. Exposure for your business, low cost to entry and to access. That is what exposure for your workforce is. There are tools online right now that are free. Like I said, most of the graphics from this presentation have been made by free online tools. And one of the other big things about exposure, not just exposure to the tools, but exposure to examples of people using them. And so I would encourage the C-suite level folks to get out there and to set the example, set the tone for the organization, and also set the tone that it's going to be experimentation up front. So experimentation is one of the bullets down below, but let me first hit on the experience piece. The experience piece is just trying it out. That's going for the motorcycle ride and having no destination. Just getting out for the joy of the ride. Inclusion of this in a regular workday would be very beneficial. And I know that we're trying to do more with less and to cram more into less time, but sometimes giving humans time to be creative and to experience will have exponential rewards down the road. So it could start out as informal brown bags where people share experiences, quick workshops where people get their hands on these tools and just use them for fun. They enjoy doing it, and they're doing it alongside some of their leadership as well. And last, experimentation, a use case with direct human oversight. So this is the going for a ride with a destination in mind. And now remember that experimentation is just that. It's experimentation. What you're going to get out of it are findings. It's not the end state. And so with that, going back to our Cheshire cat, if you're going to make it to the top, get a grip on this rock and get a grip on yourself. And so oftentimes when people hear this, they think, okay, we're going to get over this mountain. But this is actually a two-part phrase. Get a grip on this rock. So the next step in the process, and get a grip on yourself, meaning understanding yourself and your people is critical to overcoming any mountain. And a few final words from me here. Haste makes waste, so I rarely hurry. One of the things that I encourage is that businesses should try to hurry up and adopt so their employees can slow down and learn. Give time and space for creativity, because once you start and you keep going, then you're going to have that success that you're looking for. And it's important to not let decision paralysis get in the way of that progress, because not all who wander are lost. Sometimes it's okay to wander or to fail fast, or whatever saying that we're going to use. Just get out there and try, because there are only a few that find the way. Some don't recognize it when they do, and some don't ever want to. And for that, I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for your time.
And Aaron, I thank you very much indeed. I also have this wonderful image of your house being full of purple cats wandering around, prevailing you with wonderful bits of Gen AI-based knowledge, whereas my cat wanders around the house asking if I've got any chicken and complaining I won't let him on the bed. So I think there's a slight differential there. You've wonderfully rounded up so many different threads from the event today. So again, thank you so much for joining us here at Tech and AI Live Gen AI.
Thank you.
A pleasure.